You listen to the AZ Wildcats podcast, and we're very excited to be partnered with BetMGM this season. Here's the deal. If you haven't already signed up for BetMGM, use bonus code PHNX, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using promo code PHNX. Place a pregame wager or moneyline wager in the amount of at least $10 on any market at any standard odds price. You will receive $200 in bonus bets instantly, regardless of the outcome of your wager. Just make sure you use bonus code PHNX when you sign up. And to kick off this partnership, we're doing a massive watch party this Saturday at 2 p.m. at the BetMGM at State Farm Arena. Come watch the last stages of college basketball play out. It's already over, but that's still on here. Plus, if you register and place your first bet with promo code PHNX when you sign up, you'll receive a PHNX t-shirt. And now let's hear from Shane Diefenbach talk about what you need to know about the hold on. I'm doing this myself here. So just a second here. Let's see here. And now let's get the disclaimer from Shane.
Not available in Washington, D.C., Mississippi, Nevada, New York, and Ontario. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Colorado, D.C., Illinois, Indiana, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369, New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, Arizona. 1-800-522-4700, Kansas, Nevada. 1-800-327-5050, Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF, Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help, Michigan.
All right, there we go. Now, joined by the
Don't go to the watch party. Do check out BetMGM.
Do check out BetMGM. Yes, exactly. Now, joined by the great William Brad Alice. I am Mike Luke. All right, back the A, Mike and Brad, and Rich Carrillo. Rich Carrillo, who I've grown on. What's happening, Papa Brad? All right, we got a lot to get to this show. We're going to talk Arizona basketball. We're going to talk Arizona football, and we're going to talk conference realignment. But first, I wanted to get your take. We're going to lead here with Arizona basketball first. I'll give it a lot of people here that are asking. They're like, all these different schools are tied with these different players, and people asking, what's Tommy Lloyd's plan? What is this? I'm just going to say this, that at this stage in the game, that I do know that he has a plan, but at this stage in the game, Brad, that he's got to be able, he's got to be able to make it work. Like I said, because if you don't reach out to a ton of different people, you got to be able to hit on the players that you want. And that's something that you got to give Sean Miller a lot of credit for, is that Sean Miller always seemed to have players. He never really was lacking for that. That's something that Lloyd's got to show here.
Well, except maybe a true point guard for Sean Miller.
Right. True.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what the plan is. He's obviously reached out to a handful of transfers. Unlike ASU and I think Arkansas, he hasn't reached out to every single transfer in the country like those two teams have seen to. ASU actually pulled in a pretty good kid.
Yeah, I think it was a good kid.
Potentially good kid from Louisville. Obviously, we know he's looking at the transfer market. Obviously, we know he's looking overseas. I think he's doing some recruiting at home. The fact that we haven't seen Dylan Anderson enter the transfer portal is probably a positive sign. The fact that Tubelis has not declared for the draft is probably a positive sign. My guess is he's looking to see what the NIL money is going to be. I don't think it's any coincidence that we were all offered a chance to buy some Tubelis shirts yesterday on Twitter. So, yes, there's a plan, but you have to execute the plan. The good ones do. The great ones do it every time. Tommy Lloyd has, obviously been pretty good at constructing teams the last 2 years, even if the tournament runs weren't what we hoped. But he's got to do it again. And yeah, credit, you could talk about Miller, talk about Lute. Lute needed a big, found Rodinovich mid-year. Right. Lute needed a guy, and that was tougher to do back then because you didn't have the automatic transfer. I mean, in fact, they didn't have grad transfers until near the very end of the Lute Olson era. If it wasn't the beginning of the Miller era, but now it's a little easier. So we'll see what he can do. I have a lot of confidence in Tommy Lloyd, the the development coach. I have a good deal of confidence in Tommy Lloyd, the game day coach. There are still some questions out there with Tommy Lloyd, the recruiter. And again, I don't think it's as bleak as many people do. But
it's an open question. It's a question mark, though. I mean, that's fair to say. You and I are both Tommy Gunn fans for sure. So let's look at what we have returning this year. Pretty cool little graphic right here. So you'll have Kylan Boswell, who's going to be a sophomore, running the point guard spot. Let's talk about him first. I think Kylan Boswell should be able to be something like 15 points, 4 or 5 assists, and play pretty dogged defense right there. He's a guy that I look to really be the engine of this team this coming year.
Yeah, I like Boswell. I'm surprised his numbers are as low as that. Sorry, there's a few misprints.
No, there are for sure. Yes.
Pella Larson's apparently 5'8". I know. I think Kylan Boswell has proven to us that he's a heck of a player. Obviously, some of those numbers of his are a little low because of the early season not playing much. 15 points is a lot it's a huge jump. I'm pretty confident that Boswell can step up his role, and that's one reason our good friend Kirk Risa is not here. So yeah, Boswell to me, if Balo comes back, he still is among the best players in the Pac-12. Obviously, you have to hope that KJ Lewis can come in and play a role right away, whether it's at the 2 or the 3. You got to hope that Pella Larson continues at least to be the same guy that we have seen, if not. And assuming Tabellas leaves and either Vesser or Anderson or both need to step up their game. I see talent in both of them. I think obviously because he played more, I think Vesser's a more likely candidate to make the leap this year. But yeah, there's a lot of work to go.
Okay, now a lot of people are asking, and again, Pella Larson, much to people's surprise, is not 5'8" right there, and he's also not 160 pounds. Basically, we put my dimensions under Pella Larson there, Brad.
Are you only 5'8", Mike?
About 5'9", but
I was gonna say, I thought you were like good 5'10", 5. But again, everyone looks tall to me.
Yes, for sure. No, I got that. But what I do need though is we need again, and I'm going to be we're going to talk about KJ Lewis here in a second, right? Because I think that's a great question there, Christopher. Cord Lopez, I will tell you this, keep saying playing with absolutely no proof. I can't put it out there. I get how pretentious that sounds, but if it doesn't pan out, I will tell you what the plan was. So how about that? I think that's a fair deal right there.
Now, Cord, having no longer being active in the media like I was, if you don't think Mike and if you don't think Jason Shear are talking to people in and around the program, I'm not going to say who, not going to say how close to the program, you're foolish. Guess what? You know who else is? The guys at Go AZ, the guys at 24/7, the guys at the Star. You talk to people, and it may not be directly with Tommy himself, but you don't put out that there's a plan without there being a plan. That's just how the game works. So I can confidently say that if Mike is saying there's a plan, there's a plan. Now, the plan may fail. Here, ready for the drinking game? The Chiefs have a plan at wide receiver. I don't know what it is. I'm very worried about it right now. But teams have a plan. Again, it's now executing that plan. Miller had a plan. Didn't always work out.
But what I can't have happen is this, though. I think we're at the stage when you're dealing with international players. One of my concerns about Tommy Lloyd, and keep in mind, I always got to preface this by saying Tommy Lloyd's been awesome. But I do feel that the international route now just kind of becomes a catch-all for everything, where, you know what, well, we'll just go get 3 guys overseas. Well, when you look at it this past year, you had Henry Vasar come in, who was supposed to be this big-time player. And again, he might still be, but he's a ways off. Philly B, same situation, really wasn't able to contribute this year. And so when you just rely on that, to me, that's kind of hit or miss, and you're probably getting about a 33% immediate value there. Tabellas was able to play immediately. Like you said, Ivan Radenovich was able to play immediately. But those have kind of proven to be the exception so far, William.
Yeah, I mean, look at Umar Bala, who obviously Tommy recruited to Gonzaga. It took him 3 years. And there are several reasons. Now, you can also look at the 2 teams that played for the national title last night. Each had at least one, and I think a few guys from Africa. Now, I don't know what their career development was because I don't follow those programs closely. My guess is it's typically slower for the guys from Africa because unless they are in the minor league system of a European team, they're just not facing that competition. But what you have with all the international players, you have a style change. The European game, very different from the American game. You have a culture change. Most of these guys are not coming from, they're not coming from London, which can kind of resemble the East Coast. So there's a language issue. There is an education issue. A lot of these guys are in these athletic programs. So while they're getting good education, it's very different because it's centered around the club team they play for. So, and then imagine the adjustment to college from being a kid. For some of these guys, they meet their first girlfriend, or they meet their first drink, or they meet their first homework assignment where mom and dad aren't there to help them. Mom and dad are 6 time zones away or 9 time zones away. So there's a huge thing. It's not just talent, because you can all look at Umar Bala and go, that guy's talented. I look at Henry Vasar and go, that guy's talented. But it has to come together if it's going to come together. Forget all the other things. Mohamed Tangera is a great example. He actually played in America at a prep school.
Would he have been good if he wasn't just eating saltine crackers?
If he didn't blow out his back. People forget he had a huge back injury.
Well, isn't that because he was just eating saltine crackers?
It might have been, yeah. And for those of you who don't know, he literally was eating like the free saltine crackers at the salad bar so he could send his meal money home.
Yes.
But that guy, I saw him play in high school. He sure did look like Pete Williams to me. And Pete Williams said he looks like a better Pete Williams to me. So that's the challenge. Now, let's not pretend there aren't challenges with American players. Miller brought in 5-star guys who did not contribute. Josiah Turner liked some recreational things more than he liked basketball. Who was the big guy from New Orleans who had all kinds of issues?
Craig Victor?
Yes, Craig Victor, and other guys just aren't fits. I mean, Alonzo Trier was a terrific player. Didn't fit the system. Kobe Simmons is in the NBA. Didn't fit Miller's system. So that's why I'm not ready to pronounce KJ Lewis as a surefire solution. Do I love his tape? Yes. Do I think he's a terrific player? Yes. But again, A, that's a lot of pressure to put on an 18-year-old kid. B, you
know what I like about him, though? And again, I don't want to compare him to like Hassan Adams or anything like that, because Hassan came in ready to – Hassan, I think you can make the case, was underutilized as a freshman. But what I do like about him, though, is he's a next-level athlete, and he's strong and he's physical. That is something that we didn't necessarily have an abundance of this year, Brad.
Yeah, like Nick Howard saying, he's a dog.
Right.
In a good way. That's an AWG dog, not an OG dog.
Right.
Is that a read later, maybe?
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, again, that's a lot of pressure to put on a kid. Now, again, you never know. Andre Iguodala was mediocre as a freshman. Hassan Adams was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Mike
Hassan
D
was better as a sophomore, too, than Andre was as a sophomore.
Yeah, and then again, Mike D came in, and I would argue Mike D, was obviously a better pro player than Miles Simon. Miles Simon was miles ahead when they got to campus. Right. Some guys take longer. And, just look at who was the kid who just transferred out of Oregon, 5-star kid, barely played. Why? Because he just wasn't a fit, wasn't ready. Who knows? I mean, all these kids in the transfer portal. So, again, I like KJ Lewis. I'd be very surprised if he's not the starting 2 guard next year, or maybe playing an undersized 3, but you can't count on it. So you still have to find some guys in the transfer portal or, again, Europe. And I would like to diminish the European thing, mostly because, and maybe I'm this is the old man, that scene in Moneyball where they're talking about I
know exactly where you're going. Yes.
But part of the reason I think there was a lack of energy in the tournament is, again, and I mentioned this on your last show, I mentioned it in my podcast, these guys didn't grow up with the NCAA tournament.
Right.
To them, it's secondary to representing their country. And as it probably should be. If you're the best 5 under 18 players in Estonia, you're playing on the U18 national team, if not the regular national team. Whereas if you're a top 5 player in the high school class of 2023, you probably played on the U18, but you're not competing for world championships like real ones. I mean, that's what the pros do. So
But that's where the portal, I think, is kind of the great equalizer here. And by the way, I would have loved to have seen how Lute Olson would have navigated the portal because I think he would have been a master at it. But
how many transfers didn't hit for him? When he brought a transfer in,
they were good.
I mean, obviously, Luke Recker didn't work out because he never played.
But that's because he almost died.
But Brian Williams,
Lauren Woods.
Down the list. Lauren Woods.
Dylan Rigdon even.
And Rick, again, yeah, and that was that was one of those guys who just wanted a chance to play up. But yeah, Lute would have been fun because again,
Chris Mills.
Lute was a master evaluator. He rarely missed on a kid from a physical thing. Sometimes there was things you couldn't, judge. Certain guys not being good kids or things like that, especially later in his career. But he didn't miss often on his evaluations. A lot of times he brought in guys knowing they were going to be role players, and everyone else hyped him up. But privately, he's like, no, he's just a role player.
All right. Well, you know what is right now you got the Four Peaks, and you could say to yourself, they're role players, but that doesn't mean that they're always going to be role players right here. And Four Peaks, the official brew of PHNX sports as well. Check it out. I have had Four Peaks. I've had a kilt lifter before. Here's the deal, though. You got the NFL draft coming up. New coach, new GM. The Cardinals have the third pick in the draft. It's a big opportunity for the Cardinals. The best place to take in this pivotal moment and the rest of the NFL draft is on April 27th at Four Peaks 8th Street Pub. Must be 21 years or up. And our good friends at Tap and Bottle. Scott and Rebecca was texting with them earlier. Great people. William has known them for a while. I have known them for a while. Good people. Again, support local. You can many times get Four Peaks is there as well. Check out the downtown or the northwest location. Great people right there, and support a great product. But that's where, again, with the portal, though, there's no more excuses for me in this. Again, and we're going to get to some conference realignment here in a second, but you've got to be able – other schools are doing it. This is where – you look at Kansas State, and we had the graphic up the other day. You got Keontae Johnson. You got Marquise Noel. Those were the backbone of your team. You look at Texas. Heck, you look at what UConn was able to do. You look at Gonzaga. They are out there. Tommy Lloyd has a lot to sell. He's got a fun product. He's got a fun style. He's got playing time. To me, there's no excuse not to get difference makers this offseason, Brad.
No, I mean, you talk about the combination of proven success, sending guys to the pros, weather, conference environment. Yeah, you should be able to get guys. And that's, again, one reason I'm a little concerned with his high school recruiting, because the style they play, again, I'm not saying it can't happen. Because, again, if Sean Miller doesn't get 3 guys from USC, and 2 guys who were committed to Xavier, we're not talking about his first recruiting class because he missed on a bunch of guys that year, including a guy who went to South Florida. But they have to land some guys. They have to land some difference makers. As much as we all like Sed Henderson, you can't have 3 Sed Hendersons in this class.
We're fine with Sed Henderson. Sed Henderson is a great 7th guy, a fantastic 7th guy.
They probably, again, if Tubelis leaves, and I think he's leaning that way, you got to find, your number 2 or your number 3 guy. I'm assuming Boswell and Bala are 1 and 2 in some regards. So you got to find a fringe all Pac-12 type player. And those guys are out there, but you got to find them and you got to hit on them. If you're going to take a guy from a mid-major or a low major, you got to make sure they are, more TJ McConnell than, some of these other guys.
Cord Lopez, I will say this: look for connections. That's my only clue. And look for connections. Just look for connections right there. That's all I can say. And again, we talked about player from the Midwest. Check it out.
Yeah, and again, part of the reason Mike's not giving out names is, I can tell you this: staff doesn't want a lot of names out there.
No.
And again, I used to do recruiting when Lute was around. Right? I talked to people close to the program. Sometimes they wanted guys everyone to know Arizona was after a guy. And sometimes, keep it quiet. When Jawan McClellan committed, no one knew. Even though it was obvious Arizona was going to go after him. They didn't advertise Gilbert Arenas because they didn't want anyone else involved.
Right.
Other guys.
Well, that one you totally understand. Let's just get this kid to campus.
Yeah, Rodney Tension discovered that guy. So just get him because he was going to blow up the minute anyone figured it out. So again, that is one reason Mike's not. And again, if you follow Jason's message board, he knew about Vasar. He couldn't say it. He hinted about it because the staff doesn't want it out there because a lot of these guys are under contract,
right?
Whatever the player development thing they do in Europe. They don't want other teams snatching them away because other teams aren't sending guys to Europe to scout these guys. So
right.
I'll leave it at that.
Brad and Mike, with SDSU success, will they snatch quality domestic recruits from Arizona? I don't believe so because I think they're looking for a different kind of player. But that's another school right there. Transfer portal guys. You look at Matt Bradley right there, a kid from Cal, obviously. You look at you got multiple other guys there as well that they were able to bring in that were difference makers, that weren't just kind of rotational dudes.
I will say this. I think if San Diego State winds up in the same conference as Arizona, and I don't know what conference that's going to be, I think it will step up their recruiting. One of the reasons we have seen a decline in the two Washington schools, originally Washington State, now the Huskies, is Gonzaga gets those guys. Oh, a lot of those guys.
You know what it is, though, too, Brad?
Same thing that happened to Washington State football for a while. Boise State took all those guys.
Right.
Because Washington State used to get those fringe guys from LA who didn't have the great grades, and all of a sudden they're going to Boise State.
You know what doesn't work, though, at Washington, in my opinion? The old white guy that runs the zone defense. In my opinion, you've got to be able to tailor that hire to Seattle. You've got to be able to tailor that hire to. Now, granted, Romar ran its course, but I think you've got to be able to get guys in there that can really get those type of players.
No, you need a guy, and I don't know who that guy is, but I think you need young. I think ideally in most large market schools, you want an African-American head coach. I think UCLA is the exception, and I'm a little bit surprised Cronin has worked as well as he has. But, if Brandon Roy ever wanted to make the jump to high D1 coaching, I think he would go in and crush it. I
think he'd wall off all of Seattle immediately.
Wall off Seattle, probably Portland as well.
Right.
Because of his ties to that, community, obviously, as well from his playing days. But yeah, that's the kind of guy I think you need there. And again, Mike Hopkins had one good season, his first season using Romar's guys. He's been awful. I don't know why he's still there. I'm not a fire the coach guy, but it's obvious he's not the answer. So why keep him?
We're going to get into that in a second here when we talk about the conference and expand. Well, you know what, Brad? Let's get into it right now. That's another reason that I want to leave the Pac-12. Look at how many of these schools just don't look like they care about athletics. Let's talk about Stanford for a second. I grew up and Stanford was one of the top 10 to 12 programs in the country year in and year out. I know they only had the
sport.
Yes. You had Stanford right there. Then Cal was always kind of in the mix. Granted, they were cheating, but either way, they were bringing in Jason Kidd. They were bringing in Lamont Murray. They were bringing in the Jelani Gardners of the world. They were bringing in high caliber players. And then you look at the era too with Tedford, where you had, your Aaron Rodgers, your Marshawn Lynch, et cetera. Those schools now don't care about athletics. Then you look at a school like Washington. Like you said, why is Mike Hopkins still there? He's clearly not the answer. I mean, these are just schools upon schools. They clearly don't care about athletics.
I will go a step further. ASU. It's obvious Bobby Hurley will never take you to the next level. Now, if you were
but at least he doesn't suck, though.
No, but if you, and this is where, again, it's tough. Because much like some of the guys at the end of the Romar era, I'll tell you the best one. Ernie Kent at Oregon. It was obvious that he could not get over the hump.
Right.
So if you're Oregon and you have aspirations of being an elite program, you had to get rid of Early Kent. They ran with him for too long. Bobby Hurley, I don't think will ever be anything more than a first weekend coach.
Mm-hmm.
And while I think it would be very difficult for ASU to be anything more than that, what they are,
there is a higher apex, is what you're saying.
But with the talent there, he should be better. Again, take out the Mobleys of the world. Is ASU's talent, which if they were all together, if he wasn't keep losing kids, discernibly different than USC, except at the highest end? I know USC has the Mobleys or whatever. Infield has done a better job at USC with kind of similar talent because he retains his talent. Guys aren't bailing on USC. Well,
isn't that just because
ASU's turning over their roster again?
Isn't that just because of kind of the schizophrenic nature of Bobby Hurley? I mean, you watch, and which is kind of which is a flaw. You watch, and I got into this, and this is a little bit off topic. You watch Danny Hurley and you watch Bobby Hurley. I know Danny Hurley can get on the officials. That Danny Hurley can go crazy. But you watch Danny Hurley, though, and there's also moments where you can tell, all right, I got to calm this one down. I got to be serious. That is something that he possesses that Bobby Hurley just doesn't possess and won't ever possess. It's kind of the Mike Stoops, Bob Stoops situation.
Yeah. And part of me wonders what Bobby Hurley's like. Well, look at how he treated what's his face? The brother.
Marcus Bagley.
He threw that kid under the bus.
Right.
Now, Bagley may have deserved it. I've heard things that he's a butthead behind the scenes. Look at the shirt his dad wore. Yeah. The dad taking Nike money. I mean, probably not an easy kid to deal with, but he publicly threw that kid under the bus. I wouldn't send my kid there.
Right.
If I want to, for lack of a better word, a hard butt to and I have the choice of Mick Cronin or Bobby Hurley, I'm taking Mick Cronin every day of the week.
Because at least Mick Cronin is, and again, it's kind of the Sean Miller thing, the Mick Cronin thing. Yes, they can go crazy, but at the end of the day, though, there's also still somewhat of a Danny Hurley the same way, still somewhat of a professional factor in play there that Bobby Hurley just is incapable of possessing.
I look at it this way. Look at Mick Cronin defend his players, fight for his players.
Right.
Promoting Jaime Jaquez for Player of the Year. I don't think he's warm and fuzzy, but I'm guessing he's pretty good to his guys behind the scenes, especially the guys who commit to playing his style. And I don't think Bobby Hurley's that guy. But yeah, and I'm saying this, Stanford needs a new coach. Yes. Oregon State needs a new coach. I get that you couldn't fire him after the Elite Eight run, but it's obvious he's not the answer. And I'm not sure anyone's the answer to Oregon State. And that might be part of the problem too with the Pac-12.
So
you can't win at Oregon State. You can't win at Washington State the way they're built right now. You can't win at Cal right now.
Well, let me stop you right there. Just think about all the schools that we're talking about, though, that you really can't win at a high level, or you have questions about where their athletic programs' priorities are or their overall institutional priorities. You start with Cal, you start with Stanford, then you go up to Oregon State, then you go up to Washington State, then you go to Washington, to a lesser extent ASU. These are all schools right here where you wonder, do you really care? And because you probably know you already have the guy that can't get you to that next level.
Yeah. And if you look at, again, and I know we've talked about the Big 12 and I know people might be, but even the schools I would have said you can't win at, you're winning at TCU, because they went out and out. Granted, they got lucky. He's an alum, but they got Jamie Dixon. Look at Kansas football this year. As soon as they started winning a couple games, they put 50,000 people in that stadium. And then they came back down to earth. But yeah, there is a commitment to athletics I think is missing. And again, some of that's that West Coast malaise. Some of it is, unfortunately, you've got a lot of programs in and around big cities, and it's tough to compete with pro sports right now. So if you're Washington, and again, you don't have the NBA there, but you are going to soon again, probably, you're dealing with the Mariners and the Seahawks. And, if you're Oregon even, and Oregon is probably bad example because their athletic department is very good, but they're essentially a suburb of Portland. I mean, I know not exactly, but ASU is always going to play second fiddle to the pro teams up there. There's a reason PHNX doesn't just have ASU. Because I'm guessing their Cardinals get more view. The Suns right now with KD. If you have your choice, you have $50. Do you want to go courtside at an ASU game, or do you want to go rafters for a KD game? I know which one I'm taking.
By the way, is that not the ultimate Suns thing ever, though? And Brad and I are long-suffering Suns fans, so we can say this. The Suns get KD, and guess what they're probably going to get in the first round? The Warriors, a fully loaded, healthy Warriors team. Come on, man.
And then somehow some guy will step off the bench or or break his nose or blow out his Achilles. Just
So
like
weak.
happens.
Right. By the way, Brad, have I told you about Illegal Pete's before?
You have. And
All right.
I want to hear more.
All right. That is the kind of go-getter spirit that we like hearing. All right. Here's the deal. Illegal Pete's, you can go downtown in here in Tucson on University, or you can go to Tempe. Illegal Pete's delicious ingredients and customizable options are the perfect way to treat your guests to a culinary adventure they'll never forget. A culinary adventure. I like that. To book your catering order, head to catering.illegalpete's.com. Plus, be on the lookout for our PHNX crew. We'll be doing live shows at the Illegal Pete's Tempe location on April 15th. Again, great drinks, mouth-watering food, you name it, they've got it, and OGs. Might say to yourself, Mike, what can OGs do? Here's what OGs can do. Maybe you're somebody like William Brad Alice and you have a hard time sleeping at night. OGs is here for you right here, and there's so much more than gummies. They are about the culture and everything we do. They are truly about making the experience and weaving into the fabric of PHNX. Okay, so again, the Sleep Edition gummies are live and active, plus tons more. As always, you can find them at your local dispensary by checking out OGs.com. Must be 21 years or up to enjoy. Rich Carrillo with a great point right here. They should hire Pasternak. They tried to hire Pasternak. He didn't want the job. That's the key. And if you're Pasternak, it's smart because you don't want that job.
The irony is, Pasternak could wind up at Stanford in a year.
Right.
I'll go with my conspiracy theory too. I think there's two jobs to look at for the future of Arizona basketball in case Tommy Lloyd ever winds up at Gonzaga. Look at what Damon does at Georgia Tech the next few years and keep an eye on Pasternak. I think those two guys could be in play at Arizona. If Lloyd ever leaves, I don't know if he would.
Damon's, man, I'll tell you what, though. Damon's in a rough spot. Georgia Tech's a tough place to win now because you would leave. Bobby Kremen's kind of had the template because you had all those point guards in succession. But, man, those days are far in the background.
Yeah, but if you can even just start keeping some kids home from Atlanta, from grab a few kids from South Carolina, things like that, you should be able to do it. But again, it's a big city school, and they play fifth fiddle.
Right.
Not
Literally.
only you have to compete with the three pro sports, you have to compete with the Bulldogs.
Right.
So it's tough.
Now, let me ask you this before, if Arizona, another reason I like the Big 12 is, yes, you might take some lumps at first, but you know what would get exposed very quickly? Roster shortcomings and roster building shortcomings in the Big 12, because every single game is brutal, essentially. I mean, it's not just Kansas. It's not just Baylor. It's Kansas State. It's TCU. It's Iowa State. You got Houston coming in. You got Cincinnati. I mean, it's across the board. It's just loaded. I mean, That
said, and again, if you're Arizona, you're the second marquee there.
Yeah, for sure.
Because all those teams you mentioned, with the exception of kind of Cincy, have had trouble maintaining their success. Kansas is a blue blood. They may be second only to third to Kentucky and Carolina. But as good as Baylor's been, if Drew's not there, what's Baylor? Baylor basketball had no success before.
You bring in Dave Bliss.
Yeah. Kansas State, fun story this year. When was their last Elite Eight? 88.
I'm also curious if they can keep that coach around too, because he's got a big
coach
time
around
field.
And keep guys coming in. I mean, Manhattan, Kansas is essentially Pullman, Washington.
Yeah.
With
Jamie Dixon, though, at TCU, doing a very nice job.
Yes, but if how old's Dixon now? Again, so you've got, it's loaded. I mean, as long as Kelvin Sampson's at Houston, and I'm assuming his kid's going to get the job when he leaves, as long as Huggy Bear's at West Virginia, Cincinnati is Cincinnati. They're rarely going to be down. So it's a better conference top to bottom. And Arizona would probably drop 2 or 3 more conference games a year. But you should be in good shape. Just like, again, UCLA basketball is in for a rude awakening when they go to the Big 10. At the end of the day, they're still UCLA basketball. They're going to be top 2 or 3 programs there.
Brad, we do not talk positively about Big 10 basketball on this show. We don't.
Well, that's the other reason UCLA is going to be successful there. It's not as good it's better top to bottom, but the top's not as.
But they all still suck.
The top's still not as good as the Pac-12 top 2. So,
All right. Here's the thing. When you got Zach Edey, the National Player of the Year, and 4 guys that look like Mike Luke and William Brad Allis running around, that is the epitome of Big Ten basketball. You know the epitome of Big Ten basketball player? Hunter Dickinson, who has entered the transfer portal. A big, slow prodder, that guy. Plotter, excuse me.
in reality, what the Big 12 was, the Big 12 1 to 9 was most conference. It was a really good conference without any elite teams at the top. The top 4 teams in the Big 12 were better. The top 4 teams in the Big East were better. Now, the 11th place team in the Big 10, because there's 74 teams, was probably better than any other conference's 11th place team. So was there a grind? Yeah, kind of. But the top was not the quality that these other leagues were, and that showed in the tournament. There's a reason the Big East had, 4 teams in the Sweet 16 and the eventual national champion. That was a grind. And if you look at what UConn did, they had one bad month, one bad 2-week stretch. And other than that, we're pretty dominant all year. And
Tommy's left nut. I will take, yes, I have to check this out. Field of 68 has started to be on the bandwagon of the Big Ten not being very good. It's a movement we have to, listen, I have no problem being on the front line of this movement right here, but it's something that has to be exposed, and it has to be exposed at the highest degree. All comers welcome right here.
It's a deep league. It's not a good league.
Thank you. That's the best way of putting it.
Again, the difference between team number 2 and team number 13 is minimal. The problem,
you know what it is? Every
team number 2 finishes 4th in the pack.
Every team is ASU. The different styles, obviously, but from an impact perspective, fringe tournament team. So therefore, it's a bunch of fringe tournament teams playing each other, and therefore they look better than they are. They still stink. We're on to it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, now let's talk about some Arizona football here. The star of this spring scrimmage was T-Mac. I assume you saw those catches that this kid is. I'll be honest with you. I was a little skeptical is not the right word, but I wanted to see him be able to do what he did at the high school level against college players. And towards the end of the season last year, he started dominating. This guy's just got a next level feel to it. And along with Cowing, if they can stay healthy, I said this yesterday and I stand by this, William. I believe that's as good a receiving duo as there is in the country. There might be ones as good. I don't know that there's anybody better, though. Am I just being stupid?
No, I mean, obviously, I'm guessing the Ohio State has 2 better guys because they always do. They seem to be 20 deep at wide receiver. But no, the fact that you can't immediately name a better duo bodes well. And if someone says, well, they're the 5th best duo in the country, okay. When has Arizona ever had the 5th best receiving duo in the country? So yes, it's a very, very nice.
Let me ask you this: was Dennis and Jeremy, was that one of the top 5 duos in the country?
It's so hard to say because they were underutilized.
Right. Well, right.
My guess is probably not. McDaniel was really good, but he wasn't. I mean, I'm guessing, obviously T-Mac's a fringe first round guy. Cowing might not be because of his size, but
Cowing's probably Dennis, though.
Yes, exactly. So T-Mac's more talented than McDaniel. He hasn't put up those numbers yet.
Right.
Actually, he probably has. My guess is McDaniel probably never had more than 500-600 yards.
He had about 900. He had about 900 yards.
I'm more bashing on poor Dick Tomey's lack of throwing the ball. But yeah, they were very good together. Obviously, Arizona's had some very good, but this is probably the best 1-2 punch potentially that Arizona's ever had.
You know who else was very intriguing to watch, and his pops was there as well. But Kean Burnett. It's funny. He's kind of been overlooked in all of this right here, but Kean Burnett is a player that I would love to see make that next step. Now, again, you've already got Tanner McLaughlin at tight end, who's very, very good. But Kean Burnett, you just look at him physically, how much different he looks, and keep in mind, this was the kind of player that Arizona doesn't generally get. He could have gone anywhere he wanted. I would love to see him take that next step and basically force his way onto the field, William.
Yeah, and again, I think the interesting about Burnett is, can he develop, at least for this year, into that hybrid? Because with his pro background, Jedd Fisch should be in a good position to utilize kind of that hybrid tight end that so many NFL teams utilize that a lot of the college teams don't. McLaughlin is more of your traditional, even though he can line up wide, but he's what is he, 240? And I don't think
Right.
Burnett's there yet, unless he's really had a good year in the weight room, which he might. But Burnett's more athletic. So I'd love to see Burnett be, again, used as that hybrid type and use McLaughlin more as a traditional. Line up Burnett sometimes in the 2 tight end set, sometimes line him up in the slot. Heck, line him up at fullback and motion him out. There's just a lot of things you can do with a player who's a tight end, but an athletic tight end. And I'd like to see Arizona utilize that formation, especially now that you are missing Singer. And, obviously there's some young guys who look the part. But, if you have to line up Cowing more on the outside because of personnel, then, put Burnett in the slot.
Let's talk about Dwayne Akina now, coming back here. Now, again, he's an analyst. I would imagine he'll be on the staff next year if he wants to, but he's an analyst. You watch there's a comfort level for me in having Dwayne Akina back in the program. Because again, Johnny Nansen could be a great DC. I don't know, but I do know that the defense took a step back last year. It just wasn't as good. I think it's hard to argue that. And I think a big part of that was the secondary, in which, especially in that ASU game, it felt like it was kind of that Marcel Yates thing again, where, you know what, let's just give them 10 yards up front and hopefully they don't beat us over the field. That's not going to happen with Dwayne Akina right there. I love having his eyes on the product right now, even if he's not a full-time coach.
Yeah, and right now he's getting the coach on the field because I guess Ricky Hundley is on the DL. Hope Ricky feels better. There's some also talk they may reassign some guys and put Akina. But I'll tell you what, one of the great examples of just what a bulldog Dwayne Akina is, he came in at the end of the Stoops era. Obviously that's now 10 plus years ago, but he wasn't a spring chicken. And I can tell you at that point, some coaches had checked out on the staff. And he, along with David Nickel, who recently passed away, another good dude, and I want to say Big Joe, held that recruiting class together.
Right.
Now, they ended up losing some guys they shouldn't because, again, some other coaches checked out. But those guys came in late in the process, and they held a recruiting class together. And at that time, he was 50-something years old. Akina didn't need to do that. He was brought in to coach, not recruit, but he did. I think, he's not going to be a guy who I don't think is going to be the pound the pavement guy if he is brought on staff. But the fact is he can pick up the phone and get coaches all over the West Coast to answer.
Right.
He has a reputation. He has developed pro after pro after pro. And frankly, loves the University of Arizona, or he wouldn't keep coming back. He's now in his 3rd stint in Arizona. So yeah.
I also love him being able to work with some of these, because I think there's definitely talent in that defensive backfield, but it's raw talent. I mean, you look at a kid like a Prysock, who was a 4-star kid. You look at in the backfield, Genesis Smith coming in there at safety.
Cario Davis.
Yeah, Tacario Davis, exactly. There's talent there, but again, if you watched it, it's raw. Now, one thing, though, that you don't have to worry about is Octane Raceway and Mavericks. All right, here's the deal. There's nothing like it in the Valley right there. The ultimate place for fun for both kids and adults like William Brad Alice. Book some fun this spring at Octane Raceway and Mavericks. Kart racing, virtual reality, laser tag, axe throwing, bowling, arcade, great food and drinks. Watch all the NCAA games at Maverick in the trophy room and patio. Get a free $10 game card when you purchase an entry in the trophy room. Check out OctaneRaceway.com and Mavericks.com to learn more. Brad, I'm going to say it right now. I expect Arizona to go bowling this year. Have you changed your opinion?
They better go bowling. And I've looked at that schedule. I can make a case for 4 wins. I can make a case for 8 wins. And part of it is I don't know how good a few teams are going to be.
Right.
I do not know what to expect out of Colorado. I do not know what to expect out of ASU. Frankly, I know they got the high-profile guy. I don't know what to expect out of Oregon State, and I like their coach. I just don't know. They lost a lot. I don't know what to expect out of a lot of these teams. Mississippi State's going to be interesting without the Pirate there. Again, another rest in peace. Arizona's schedule. Again, you could tell me 4, I'd believe you. You could take the over? It's like 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably lean towards taking the over.
Take the over.
But the fact is, Arizona better meet or exceed last year for us to feel good about the Jedd Fisch era. Is the schedule easy? No. Is it daunting? No.
No.
It's what you have to play. So let's get it done. But yeah, I'll be interested. Again, I think it's going to come down to line play. I feel good-ish about the offensive line. Still got a lot of questions about the defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to see more out of those safeties still.
Right. He is the great William Brad Alice. I am Mike Luke. William, do you have any podcasts coming out this week?
Yeah, I'll have something at the end of the week, 1 or 2. Talking a little U of A. I was trying to hope to see if we got any more breaking news on either the basketball or the football front, and no one needs to hear any more about Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, and it's done.
By the way, Brad, your tweet hit the nail on the head right there. I was very happy to retweet that tweet.
Again, to sum it up, I think it was poor sportsmanship. I don't think it's worth. She's not classless, and it's not worth the column inches. Let's more talk about what a beast Angel Reese is on the offensive glass and just how freaking good Caitlin Clark is. That girl was as advertised. So let's dwell on that and not John Cena. Who cares? Again, would I want my little league kids doing it? No. Am I going to lose my mind over it? No. And Caitlin Clark said as much today. Like, it's trash talk. Let's treat the women the same as we treat the men.
He's Brad Alice. I'm Mike Luke. You've been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.